Okay, hi everyone. Hope you're doing well. Any question before we start? No, all right. One thing I think I didn't mention to your class is if you can turn on your camera, that would be nice. You don't have to, of course, but yeah, if you can just so I get some visual feedback of whatever your reaction is, that helps a lot. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll post the slide. Yeah, and the recordings and everything. Okay. So we were asking, yeah, I changed a bit the slides from since yesterday, but I've copied the comments. Don't worry about it. So let me share my screen. All right. So here we were. And the question we were asking is, so I was just talking about the Kuznets curve here, which is something that is an idea more than a curve that is linked to any specific phenomenon, because it happens in many different contexts. And I was talking specifically about the context of rivers and plastics in the ocean. And the question is, so should Canada worry about this? And yeah, so in terms of whether or not some Canadian companies may contribute to producing plastic bottles is one thing, but specifically about the outcome of Canada's contribution to the pollution. So let me show you this. This comes from a website that's I don't have, but yeah. Anyway, if I lost, I thought I put the address of the website. So yeah, so anyway, so that's a survey of all the worst rivers in the world that contribute to plastic pollution. So plastic pollution in the ocean has two main sources. So one are nets and other things that fishermen or boats throw away as trash. That's a big part of it. And since it's done in the middle of the ocean, we just have to rely on their goodwill to hopefully limit this, but it's complicated. But then one thing is, so there's this organization that asks themselves, so where does that plastic come from? And most of it comes from certain rivers. And as you can see here, so these are the main rivers that contribute to plastic. So yeah, in North America, maybe this is close to New York City, so maybe there is a small there. In Europe, you have small rivers that contribute, but as you can see, it's nothing comparable to what's happening in Southeast Asia. And this is really because Southeast Asia is developing fast, and so developing a good system for controlling pollution it takes time. So their priority is different for now, but hopefully it's going to change in the future. So just and the worst rivers of them all is the Yangtze River. Yeah. So that's what they do on the bank. So they have something that they have engineered it in a way, I think, that allows for the trash to just stay there on the shore, so they can pick it up. But obviously that's not enough. So yeah, so that's workers cleaning the trash out of the Yangtze River. So there is where the plastics comes from. And then how should you address this? Well, it's a very young entrepreneur, actually, very interesting guy, very hopeful guy, who said, so if the plastic comes from these rivers, so that's where we should try and intervene as much as possible. By catching the plastic before it reaches the ocean. And since the plastic floats, well, the plastic that sits at the top of the ocean is plastic that floats, then if it makes it also easy to catch it in these rivers before it reaches the ocean. And this is their the ocean cleanup. So that's their machine. So here you don't see, but there's a big big sort of wall that's a removable wall that just makes sure that all the plastic is going at some point to end up on this conveyor belt, and they catch a lot of plastic. So that's I think that's awesome work and super ingenious. And you see he's super young, so he's in his 20s and he's doing wonderful things for the ocean. There's a lot of work to do. He has to do that for hundreds and hundreds of rivers, but just the thing is the idea of asking yourself where does that plastic comes from and what's the most efficient way of dealing with it is really nice. And he does say that he has plans to try and reuse the plastic in some way, but that's not easily done because that's plastic mixed with other sort of trash. So how you do separate everything and reuse it is well, we're going to talk about it a bit later, but yeah, that's yeah, he makes sunglasses out of plastic. Yeah, maybe. Very stylish sunglasses, I might add. All right, so that's one aspect of the Kuznets curve. It has many aspects, but as you can see, it's so yeah. Developed nations at some point are able to clean up their act mostly, and obviously very poor nations, since they don't even have mass consumption, then they cannot do it. So it's really a middle income problem. All right. Yeah, so let's continue with the questions we were asking. So are preoccupation of the environment recent? So some answered no. And yeah, it's also true that they're not necessarily recent. So even though we have better data and we know better today, still many thinkers have been worrying about the situation of the environment for a while. So one of them was Malthus, was ecclesiastic in the, he was contemporary to Adam Smith, or just a bit after. So I think he might have been young when Adam Smith died. So you may have heard of him, I guess. Yes, no? Say in the chat if at least somebody has heard of Thomas Malthus. Yes, yeah. So yeah, do I have? Yeah. So yeah, Malthus was worried about just the fact that, so he was observing that there was poverty and war in Europe and trying to understand why that was the case. And then his brilliant idea was, oh, well, maybe it's because resources are limited. And at some point, if we go on, then there's extra population and there's extra pressure on the environment, and when the population grows exponentially too fast, then the only way in a sense to resolve the situation is to have starvation or war. So that's a very pessimistic view on the human condition, but still so it's sort of the preoccupation of the time that's parallel to what we're still thinking today. Conservation movement that's in England when there was a beginning of the first instances of industrial revolution, and they were starting to really be able to exploit the environment and cut wood. So that started it. we're going to, first oil shock. That was a big shock for the world because oil is just such a important resource. And then limits to growth is something that was written by scientists in 1970, where they tried to model the world economy and try to see where it was going with respect to resources. Yeah, so I just talked a bit briefly, but I'm going to go into more detail about it. So what Malthus thought, he thought not exactly environmental degradation. I shouldn't have written it this way, but so let's. Oh, yeah. Good, fertile, and is less available because of overpopulation. Yeah, that's even too large. So have this at 9 is perfectly fine. Yeah. So he was scared that the environment couldn't sustain humanity. So to have some, so is there somebody who has a comment on it? So was he right? Was he wrong? Why yes, why not?
I think for the sustaining humanity part, it's partially right, because now, especially with today, there's the huge issue of
So if I want
overpopulation.
to have a more economic way of seeing things, so I can show it this way. Yeah, exactly. So that's a very good point. So what he was saying is the following. So if you think about population here, so put it this way. Okay, so you have population here. And you have resources here, or food output. And you need output to live. And his idea was population is going to grow 1, 2, 4, 8. So he has this passage in his writing. He says, we see that people always have many children. So every generation has exponentially more children. But the food output is not growing at the same pace as the population. So what you would see is something like this. So this is let me put this in red. So that's food necessary to sustain population. And what he thought is the more population that you have, well, you don't have infinite amount of good fertile land for everybody, because the farmer maybe has 5 sons at the time, because you leave the farm to your sons, and they either have to go to somewhere else that's less fertile, or you have to split the farm between the 5 people. So anyways you put it, they cannot enjoy the same land capital or ground or fertile land capital as their father. So then what happens is, this is basically the food output that you get. So this is food output. Oh no, actually that's not all that good. I'm going to draw it even better than this. Yeah, exactly. So that's how he viewed things. So he thought, okay, if we have a small population, then that's fine. The food output is higher than the necessary to sustain the population, but the population is always going to grow. And at some point you cross this deadly threshold in which then food that's necessary to sustain the population is higher than the food output. So at some point here you get war, disease, famine, etc. Sorry about that. So what happened? Well, in the chat, so Mr. Lucier rightfully said, well, he didn't account for technological advancement, the Green Revolution. So yeah, all these things that made foods extremely available now. So should we blame, it's perfectly true. So we're not starving right now, but should we blame him? Well, see, when he was writing this in 1798. So back then, you really had no clue how productive we would be in terms of agricultural output. He was looking at the history of humanity until now, or until his time, and what he was seeing was epidemics, starvation, wars. So his model of the human condition was, in my opinion, perfectly good, given the empirical observation he had at his disposal. If he just knew how technology would have progressed since then probably he would have changed his mind. Yeah, but so that's for Malthus. So I pretty much like Malthus. I thought, because he was one of the first really to have some sort of dynamic macro model of population growth and in production. But then his idea didn't die, even though we had the Green Revolution, we had the technological revolution. Still, the people who thought that of course the world is not going to be able to sustain world population still went on. One very famous person was Paul Ehrlich, who really was one of the precursors of the modern environmental movement. And he wrote a very popular book in the 1960s called The Population Bomb. And so one of the claims in his book is, in the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death. Nothing can happen to prevent a substantial increase in the world death rate. So yeah, he was pretty pessimistic. So did this happen? No. Thankfully, the 70s went and there was no million people dying of starvation. But his book was so popular that he still had the second edition during the 70s. So since there was no starvation happening, then he changed in the 1970s to in the 1980s. But thank God we didn't have a starvation in the 1980s either. So yeah, but still this idea that we're going to run out of food and that the planet isn't able to sustain us is something that's always been there since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And then should we blame Paul Ehrlich for his prediction? Not really. I'm tolerant of him because this is the world population. And look at when he wrote his book. He wrote his book here in about 1968, and this is the total population of the planet. So it used to be very flat, and then there's a huge increase in population right around that moment. And now it's starting to stabilize. But and this is in purple, the population growth, the rate of population growth. And as you can see, in 1968, right at the same year as he wrote his book, So this is the highest in history, the highest growth rate of the Earth's population in history. So he was just looking at things, and he thought there's no way this can go on forever. But it looks like it did. But yeah, for him at the time, I think it was he had the right to be a bit pessimistic about things. Now, will we explode and run out of food? Well, we've survived up to here. Yeah, up to here. We're almost at 8 billion now. And the thing is, demographers are totally changing not totally changing their ideas, but we have to assess the fact that this was a unique time in human history where we had such a huge growth rate in the world population. But now we are going to go back to another time, a time where the world is almost stable. And these are a bunch of predictions as to what will be the population in this century. And you see that people, some of them think that it's going to, the cap is going to be at 8 point something billion, and it's going to happen in 2050. So it's in third year. So that's a huge change in our perspectives to think this. And some of them predict a bit later. It depends on one thing. So it's not a demographic class, but it depends on one specific thing, is how fast the big cities in Africa urbanize. So if they do urbanize quickly, then people change their habit and the fertility goes down a lot. But if urbanization doesn't happen as fast as it could, then it might continue for a bit, but still it's not going to explode. Yeah, so exactly. So Mr. Lucie, it's exactly the right way of thinking. It's now things are totally different. Now there's even a book by two demographers that was called Empty Planet. So that's purely made to freak people out, because of course, if the growth rate is zero, that doesn't mean that the number of people around is zero. It's just that everybody is old. So we're all going to be old in the 2050s, and it's just going to be a big planet of old people. Yeah, so maybe not all that fun. It's fun to have young people around, but yeah. All right, and now, so the last question is the calories. So did we survive? Well, it looks like it. So what somebody knows how much calories you need to survive for an average adult? That's something I didn't know, but yeah, good. Yeah, around this, I had 2,000 a day, so 2,300. And look where we are, where we are. So that's there. Yeah, that's there. And now we are totally above. So the problem, and you see in Canada, we're 3,400. So by the way, calorie and kilocalories are, some people say calories, some others say kilocalories, but that's the same thing. It's just a weird way of saying it, a weird measure. And so you see Canada, it's we're way above. And there's this saying that in most of the world right now, the problem is not under production of food, but over availability. So it's obesity. I'm not saying there is no starvation. Well, there is no mass starvation anymore, but there is, of course, there are many poor people. But it really is a matter of distribution, not a matter of being able to produce enough. We clearly have enough to feed everybody. Well, and waste a bit. So there's distribution that's complicated. There's everybody who, has to waste some food that's rotten in their fridge once in a while. So I'm not saying things are simplistic. It's complicated, but it looks like we've avoided the worst. All right, so onto the environmental movement. So that started in England. So major figures were John Evelyn. Yeah, so these are all associations founded to save the forest, because the forest was being overly exploited at the time. Then this, yeah, in more modern time, in the 19th century, you had the poet Henry David Thoreau. He was sort of the father of voluntary simplicity, or in French, simplicité volontaire. So he was seeing people getting rich and working hard at the factory, and he was saying, no, that's not how life should be. Life should be enjoying your simple life with nature. And then Theodore Roosevelt started thinking about creating parks and really safeguarding the nice wild places they have in the United States. They cut a big chunk of it, but still they conserved a lot. So thanks to him and thanks to other presidents. John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club in 1892. Now they have, if you go to California, they have Muir Woods, which it's close to Berkeley, where they have giant sequoia trees. It's super nice. It's close to the close to Yosemite. It's a very nice park. In Canada, there was a bit later, the Commission on Conservation. It was abolished, but then, so it started there. So people have been thinking about conservation for a really long time. All right, so oil shock. So what was the matter there is that oil is just such a fundamental resource for everybody around the world, or it has been during the 20th century. So in 1973, when the OPEC decided to restrict production and gang together and stop exporting all the as much oil as they did, and then that was a shock for everybody, because they realized, oh, so oil is scarce. What about if we run out of it? Are we in trouble? And that was introduced the worry of the time where we would eventually run out of oil. And so many predicted this peak oil, that it would happen quite fast. So what do you think? Do you think we're going towards peak oil? Should we worry about this? Yes. So is the oil reserve, so what's going to happen to oil reserves? What's going to happen to oil production? Yeah, so there's this, it's a fossil fuel. So that's a resource that it is sort of renewable, in the sense that, if you have many small sea animals that all die at the same time, and you just wait a few million years, then you're going to have oil again. But from our human perspective, it doesn't matter. So there's this this saying that whenever something cannot go on forever, it will stop. So oil production cannot go on forever. So it will stop at some point. But up to now, we have always been able to sort of find other resources, other reserves. But there's consensus among people that the reserves are what's the big thing we can find that's not too expensive to exploit is sort of found already. So who knows, maybe so the question, are we at peak oil? well, here we are. So this is oil production in the last 50 years. So yeah, it looked like we were at peak here or here, but yeah, it picked up as other people started to find oil and start exploiting it. There was here a big boom in the US with shale oil, and the US also almost became an exporter of, yeah, became an exporter, a net exporter during a few years, but it was always expensive to exploit it. Is this peak oil here? Maybe yes, maybe not. So should we worry about it? Well, so what in a, oh, I still have this, yeah, okay. So what economists usually say is there is no crisis that's anticipated. So since we anticipate that we're going to run out of oil at one day, we cannot say it's a crisis. A crisis is something that happens suddenly, it's unanticipated and has dire consequences. Problem with oil is that we've known for many years that at some point we're going to exploit it, and we're going to run out of it. So it makes sense to find alternatives, start producing electricity in some other ways, use electricity in things that would use oil. So maybe one of the hardest is perhaps planes, because you need such a high energy density to make the plane work, and if you have huge batteries, it's difficult to make it work. Yeah. So that's peak oil. Limits to growth. So that's a model that exploits the relation between exponential economic growth and limits of the planet. But yeah, it's not super popular among the economists, because that was by physicists. So they have their own way of making simplifications. So sometimes people say that the economic models are simplified. That's true. But physicists also have their way of making their simulation, but also making it simple. And yeah, no, so it's more popular amongst non-physicists. So the questions they were asking is something like this. So can humanity grow for a long time? Can we have eternal growth in oil production? And here I've added this, so energy consumption, so fish harvest, growth in fish consumption. So here I'm asking you these questions. What do you think? Because this is called limit to growth. So that's the question I'm asking you, whatever you think it means. Yes.
I think the population.
Oh, is my sound working or not? Yeah, maybe it's like the last time. Wait a second.
Wait, can you hear us?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, now I guess you can hear.
Yeah, now I can.
But I mean, the questions here are definitely they're broad. I mean, everything is based on technology, like tech advancements. Every day there's new advancements. Can humanity grow for a long time? Yes, probably. Growth of oil production, probably that will go down, because we're going to find other sources of of not gases, but as I said before, could be electricity, could be biodiesels that they're trying to find now for airplanes. Tons of different options. And then growth for energy consumptions, we're using hydro electricity. We're starting to find out that nuclear power plants end up being maybe more beneficial than using coal and all those things, or even oil. The fish harvest, well, there's a lot of science behind it to try to boost the population up, and the fish consumption, same thing, right? Fish harvest, fish consumption, it'll go together. If there's more, obviously the consumption will go, be much higher, because the price might be, lower when it comes to buying. It's like salmon and trout right now. I know, for example, here in Canada, we're able to harvest more than because there are certain companies that specialize in making more, literally playing with the genetics.
Yeah, so by harvest, do you mean so my what I meant by harvest is harvest in the wild?
I think it's more, if we're looking in the wild, it's maybe a bit harder because we are there's a lot of people on this planet, but in the next 50 years, as I said, we are in a negative downward sloping curve, population. Well, maybe in Canada, I don't know in the rest of the world, but I know in Canada for a fact that our population is getting a lot older, and generations like us, we're not having that many kids anymore.
Yeah, so but not that by person, but in total.
Yeah.
So so here's my take on it. Yeah, so the first question, can humanity grow for a long time? So, or forever? Well, what do you mean? So what's growth? And you said it perfectly. So you can grow in many different ways. So if can we grow forever in music production? Yes, can always write new music. There's no problem with that. But that's, if you sell your music, that's part of GDP. So I guess what they have in mind is GDP, but there are so many things that don't have a specific link to resources that so you have to be precise when you say these things. But then if you ask more precisely, can we use forever a non-renewable resource like oil production? Absolutely not. What cannot go on forever will stop. So it will stop, but it will not stop instantly. It will just become more and more expensive to exploit oil. And it will slow down and slow down. But the question, do we care about oil? No, we don't care about oil. We care about moving around, producing things that we need. So we care about energy. So economists, what they have in mind is, so you have a utility function or a profit function or whatever function you have, and you want to maximize it however you want to maximize it. So what we want is to produce what we need, and we need energy, but it doesn't have to come from oil. And as you said, we're just going to use alternatives for that. So, and we have, so I think the last estimates were that if we just use solar for all our energy needs, it requires something like harvesting the sunlight that fall on the planet on like 2% of the surface or something. It's something very, very small. Don't remember the number. And this is basically the same idea. So growth in fish harvest, my best guess is absolutely not. It's already at the limit. The big stocks and fish around the world in the sea are falling down. But so I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It's a tragedy that we are changing the seas so fast, and it would be better to, yeah, if we preserve them better. But yeah, coordination between nations is just so hard. But growth in fish consumption, then absolutely yes. Thanks to fish farming. So yeah. Is replacing wild catches. And yeah, so I'm going a bit further than I should maybe, but what you're going to see is harvest. What is this? it's harvesting a publicly available resource, because nobody owns the sea and nobody owns what's inside it, well, apart if it's within your national borders, in aquaculture, which is a private enterprise like all the others. And that's been the history of humanity up to now, is we sort of overexploit, or we realize that we don't have enough in nature, enough of game to hunt, enough plants to harvest. So what we do, we invent agriculture, we invent all these things. And fishing was probably the last fundamental activity that humanity has always done in the wild, that was still done in the wild up until the 2010s. Now this is catching up, and the demand for fish is just so big that aquaculture is just going to. I think I have a place where I give more data on this. Yeah, so the takeaway here is think carefully about what you're modeling exactly, and think about what the goal is. So the goal is to not die, and in that case, we have ways of still making up for it. All right, so that was the first part. Now we're going to dig deeper into economics. So what is economics? And what is environmental economics? So what distinguishes the economic approach is that we seek to understand how and why we use resources. So why do we use them for? So it's the study of allocation of these resources that are said to be rare and limited to satisfy humanity's unlimited need. So in a way, claiming that resources are rare and limited is like claiming that I don't know, that water is made of H2O, because we have many resources that are unlimited. You could say that I don't know, sunlight is unlimited because the sun is always there and will always be there. It's just so we don't really think of it as a resource, but that's something that we would be very sad of not having, and we would have to light ourselves. In a way, it's not there at night, so so it's limited. But yeah, think of anything that's limited, in limited supply on Earth. So a resource is anything that can be used to allocate and transform, allocated and transform to satisfy our need. And so not even renewable resources are unlimited. At some point, you may overexploit them. So what do we care about in economics and the environment? So we care about the interaction between these resources and economic activity, and the fact that humanity can damage it by overexploiting it or by dumping trash and the pollution. So it's the interaction between the economy and the environment. So you see that it's like many fields in economics, at the intersection of many things that as we're going to see. So resources economics is one thing that maybe is even older than economics of the environment. It's going to touch to public economics as well. So anything that has to do with organizing or managing publicly available resources. Because in a way, if I have a garden and I overexploit my garden, then it's too bad for me, but it's not like I'm really making my neighbor so sad. So really the problem of the environment is that it's a shared resource among everybody. And of course, the direct and indirect contributions of the environment to the individuals. So what distinguish distinguish? I think I should have. distinguishes. Sorry. What distinguishes the economic approach? So we're, of course, looking always at the decision of agents that choose whatever they do, so that they are open to being incentivized by taxes, by subsidies, by many sort of government interventions. So that's the basic assumption of economics, is we assume that contrary to molecules or atoms or whatever, humans are intelligent people, agents that that we have to deal with in a special way by incentives. Of course, agents are consumers, firms, non-profit organizations, government agencies. So here we're mostly going to look at firms, since they are the big players, but consumers have a role to play too. So it's founded on a cost-benefit analysis. This has two meanings. So it has, so cost-benefit analysis. So agents act by taking into account costs and benefits. So that's one thing. And the other is that government decision should be also. So this is why we're going to study cost-benefit analysis, to see how the government can more rationally decide what to implement as an environmental policy. So it recognizes the importance of incentives and arbitrage. So you know what arbitrage is? So incentives is motivations. So usually if something costs more, then you want less of it. So that's incentive. Arbitrage? No, nobody has an idea. So arbitrage is what trade is all about, in a way. So if you realize that something is it's cheap to buy somewhere, but you can sell at a high price somewhere else, then the arbitrage is the action of saying, oh, I'm going to buy a bunch of it cheaply there and sell at a higher price over there. So that's what trading is. You take advantage of this difference between regions, for instance. And why do we have to care about this? Well, we have to care about this because economic agents are smart. And if you don't tailor your policy in a smart way, then they're always going to be able to go around it. So an example I could have is, take for instance, Lego, Lego blocks. So they, in 2014, they ended their partnership with Shell following a pressure by Greenpeace because Shell was planning to drill in the Arctic. So Greenpeace said, please stop using Greenpeace oil to produce your plastic bricks. That's not nice. So that's it looks like it's a victory. So do somebody have a comment on this, or is there maybe potentially a problem with this? Yeah, can you be a bit more precise?
Well, if I can be more precise, I'll give an example here. For people that watch a bit of sports and stuff like that, Formula One is one of the most watched sports in the world. One kind of arbitrage right now is obviously these cars are pollutants to the world. They give off so much. They take so much gas and everything. So I know there's a lot of companies that have been pushing the FIA, which is the Federation de l'Automobile, to incentivize Formula One and other cars like NASCAR, etc., to maybe use either a biofuel, even take out the promotion of certain companies that are not bad, but how to explain it, that are not
Environmentally friendly.
exactly, on their cars. So just things like that. I know there's a lot of it's I feel like it's a bit of like blackmailing in a way, because they lose money on that. There's certain deals that are written in contracts or verbally said in a way.
Yeah, I see that. So it's similar, but so going back to my example, so I'm just going to rephrase it. So there's Greenpeace that talks to a specific company, Lego, and says, oh, it's bad to use shell oil to produce your plastic, so don't do it. And Lego says, okay, yes. So will that have the intended effect over time, or is there a risk that something may backfire with that? Thinking about arbitrage.
Then at that point, Lego will go to maybe with another company.
Oh yeah, that's
at the end of the day, it's business is business. If you've been with Shell for so many years and Greenpeace doesn't like it, well, they can change companies that's maybe more friendly. It's a pressure that they have from organizations, but at the end of the day, these organizations, as much as they want to pressure, it's a business that they have to run. The economy has to run on something.
Yeah, so I'm going to say what was that's right, but I guess in that case, Greenpeace would say, oh, Lego, we don't like Shell, but we also don't like BP, and we also don't like all the other oil companies. But yeah, so the thing that's likely happened is, if say Legos really stop using oil, then they would have to change their process in some way. And if they do use oil, it has to be because they're smart and they're doing it because it's the cheapest thing to do. But if they're virtuous and they say, yeah, so where's that Lego come from? Sweden or Denmark, I think. Denmark, I think. So if they say, yeah, we're the responsible company and we're going to use some other process, but then it's going to be more expensive to buy Legos. And what you have is many knockoffs. So you have Creo, Mega Construct, Banbao, Kobe, Shuban, Mega Blocks, all these imitations that are cheap. So then people say, oh, well, I like Lego, but now it's becoming too expensive, so I'm going to buy something else. So am I saying you shouldn't, you should just give up? No. What I'm saying is you have to realize that you are in a complex world with pressure to make profit and to buy the cheapest product all the time. So if you're saying we want people to buy less oil, then you have to have a smart policy that's all around, that affects everybody. So affects all the companies that produce something similar. But then why stop at Lego in particular, or Lego blocks? You could just say we don't like oil, so we tax it more, for instance. So then you don't target anybody in particular for that. So it's a smarter way to go about it. Yeah, so within the institutional framework, so this is a bit what I just said. So we're in a market economy, and so it's a cutthroat situation, and at some point, yeah, everybody is trying to make profit, and you can just deny it and say, oh yeah, no, but it's not going to happen. Well, tough luck. Yes, if you want a environmental policy that has a bite, that has effect, then you have to account for what is the environment in which you're acting. There was somebody who wanted to say something, or no? All right. Yeah, interaction between individuals, firms, government, and negotiation between sovereign states and NGOs. So yeah, this is really political. We're not going to deal too much with it, but that's part of it. Okay. Question we will cover. So why do we need environmental economics? Why should we care? Well, because we think economic. Yeah, Pablo.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a question related to the cheapest way of production.
Yeah.
Like, to my knowledge, like I don't think there is, but I wanted to ask you, isn't there like a law or like somewhere, anywhere, that has like a floor to how cheap you can go, like, you know, calculating the impact it would cause on the environment? And if there isn't, like, what would you think would be the economical ramifications of implementing a law like that?
So you're saying a standard, like you're so a price floor on what exactly?
Well, not like a price floor exactly, but like just a point that gives, you know, companies a limit of how cheap their production can be, like, you know, accounting for the damage, the externalities that are caused by how cheap it is after a point, you know, or something like that.
So what do you want to accomplish there?
Yeah, exactly. So
so my question is, so what's the goal?
Not,
what do you have in
like, let's say what you were saying about Lego and Mega Bloks, right? Mega Bloks tries to sell it cheaper, and they're probably trying to, you know, use cheaper labor, cheaper materials that are worse for the environment, worse for the societies that, you know, their productions are based on. Like, what would be the economical ramifications you think of implementing a law that would, you know, set a limit for them not to go that cheap?
Yeah, so my reflex is there are better ways, more smarter ways.
Like how?
So so my reflex as an economist is, if you don't like something, you tax it. That's easy. So you make it expensive, and plus, I'm going to be more precise. You tax precisely what you don't like. So you don't care about Lego in particular. Lego is a children toy if it makes children happy, and if it costs $1 or $5 or $10, who cares? Lego is free to do their thing. What I care about is, there's CO2 in the atmosphere that's going to bring catastrophes in the future. So that's what we want to deal with. And if exploiting oil makes CO2 release in the atmosphere, then what you want is tax oil exploitation. And you're not just going to say, because otherwise it's micromanagement. It's, I decide that in my omniscient oversight of everything that goes on in Quebec, that Lego should be should cost no less than $2. It's unmanageable. Really, it's what you can say is, okay, there's this tax to gas, there's this tax to to methane exploitation if methane is bad too. So that this sort of that's exactly what we're going to see later. Yeah. I'm not saying that standards have no point. What you often have is because otherwise it may become too complicated. So what you can say is something like cars should emit at most this level of pollution. So you're not saying I'm going to change a bit the price of the car or that. No, you just say that the new standard is that standard. So that's feasible in some cases because it's simpler and everybody can just know what the technology is, and it's easier to control. Yeah. So yeah, all of these way of doing things that we're going to see later.
But there is no tax in place as we speak, right? That tells you can't manufacture this chip or you have to pay this tax. There's nothing like that in place, is there?
For Legos or for any toy or
no for any company that produces very cheaply in any country, to your knowledge.
Yeah, so there is, so it's not there's so yeah, there is one for me, for you, and for everybody else that's a worker. It's called a minimum wage. And that's what's saying is, as a worker, cannot sell my service to below the minimum wage. So that's one. So yeah, that's a price floor. But so that exists, but for other reasons, and it's always being debated among economists. But more or less, we agree it's a good policy. Yeah, but so that exists, but you have to have a good reason for it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, so why do we need the environment economic? Simply, we think the economic approach can lead to a smart or to sound policies which have positive impact on the environment, of course. So does the protecting the environment entail sacrifice? What do you think? Yes, somehow. Big yes, no? Yes, so yes is the right answer. Yeah, of course. So why are we trying to protect the environment if it's costly? Well, because we believe that the short-run cost is smaller than the long-run benefit, for sure. But yes, so why am I asking this question? That's especially in response to all the politicians that want to have a green program and want to make green things happen. So they say, oh, but by the way, it's going to create jobs and it's going to be awesome and it's not going to cost you anything. Well, if that's the case, if protecting the environment is also the best thing you can do for profits, then it's perfect. We can just go home and chill and not care, because it's going to happen anyways, because people are going to, firms are going to be environmentally friendly on their own if that's the cheapest thing to do. So the reason why they are not doing it, and we think we have to entice them to do it, that's because it entails sacrifice. Sometimes they may be not as big as they could be, but yeah, it's because they're yes. So in most cases, we believe the private market is not operating in an efficient way from so yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. So what, yes, what do these questions mean for action? What is the socially optimal quantity of pollution? Is it zero, a lot, some a bit? Who say somebody thinks it's zero? Oh, sorry, not the private market. Yeah. Yeah, so what we're going to see is bringing pollution to zero may be very costly. So in most cases, the goal is not to bring it to zero, but to bring it to a place where the marginal damage done to the environment is equal to the marginal benefit of yeah, the marginal cost of reducing it. So what you want is not pay. So if the benefit of on the environment is like $10,000 and the cost of reducing is 10 million, so maybe the cost is outweigh the benefit. So what we want is and maybe getting to zero is extremely costly. In some cases, it might be possible, but probably not. Not zero, but as small as possible, of course. Yeah, so we believe no. If not, how can we improve the market results? So all these things we're going to see. So government intervention. What are the distributive impact of environment policy? Well, there are many. So what time is it now? Yeah, 2:25. Oh, I wish I had finished. Yeah, no, it's true. Last time it took a bit longer than. All right, we're fine. So think about this distributive impact of environmental policy. I have two things in mind, but I'm just asking the question there. Somebody have an idea what I'm talking about? Will questions like these be on the exam? I don't know. Everything that I say is potentially on the exam. How about that? So the question is, so I think the question you're asking is, Professor, what can I not study? That's your question, right?
That's pretty much it.
So nothing. No, but I'm I'm going to answer from my students' experience perspective. So the more something is being talked about in class, the more likely it is to be in the exam. And so that's okay, that's close to this one. So should we reach a zero cost pollution, zero pollution quantity? Maybe it's super expensive to be there, to reach it. In the same way, should you study 100% of every single word I have said? if you do, awesome, you're ready for the exam, but maybe you have other things to do in life. Maybe you have a nice TV show you like, and at some point you say, that's it, I'm 90% ready, whatever happens, happens. So yeah, that's my attitude towards studying. So you have to be good at guessing what's likely be in the exam. Yeah, definitions are not. So two sorts of questions I can ask. So questions like definitions, or like, yeah, understanding questions, and questions with math. So both of them are not really liked by students. So yeah, the question is a question. So yeah, or something like, tell me what you think about this or that, or this or that. You can see you said that in class, but I have another opinion. Here it is, and it might be very well informed economically. If that's the case, I'm going to say perfect, good. But it's a risk. All right, so what are the distributive impacts? So I have two things in mind. So people who pay may not be who pay / suffer. Yeah, okay. Who pay may not be the same gain from pollution reduction. So you have rich and poor countries. So sometimes big emitters are rich countries, or not so rich as we've seen, but say China, for instance. China is still developing, but it's by no means a poor countries compared to many others. And of course, there's somebody has something else in mind? A dichotomy of in terms of who pays and who benefits.
And we can go countries that are more socialist rather than I don't know, explain it. Some countries, like you said, like, you know, rich, poor, but China, for example, is more of a communist country rather than a capitalist country. I don't know. I guess that could play a role in the fact
Yeah,
of
I don't know though.
age.
So the US is pretty bad at actually, it's not that bad, but it's the US and Canada were pretty good at polluting and not caring. But so China, I don't know. So their thing is they have lots of coal, but it's hard for them to fuel their growth. But in a ways too, they have the fact that they are one state, one party state, means that when they decide something, it's so people listen to them. So it's when they want to implement something, they can. But it's true that yeah. So I'm not think about this. Some other comment. Who gains and who pays for rich and poor is one. Think about climate change. No. Current generations, future generation. So here, sacrifices are now for the hope that future generations are going to benefit from. And we would like that generations in the 70s had already not started putting CO2 in the atmosphere, because nowadays we are already seeing the impact of climate change. Oh, so we're over time already. So yeah, it's still a bit, but this shouldn't take too long. Okay, so let's stop here for now. and continue next time till, unless you have questions. So no homework today. All right, so thank you very much, and everybody, and I see you later.